Now, if you're wondering what did I just watch, that's my take on this camera. If Tarkovsky and Kubrick had a baby, it would be this camera. I know, that might be confusing, but that's how it looks like. It looks like it came out of a sci-fi movie.
Does this ever cause you any lack of confidence?
Let me put it this way, Mr. Raymer. No 9000 computer has ever made a mistake or distorted information. We are all, by any practical definition of the words, foolproof and incapable of error.
And as beautiful as it can be just as confusing. So here's my take on this bizarre camera and whether you should add this to your collection or not. Now let's give it a proper introduction and have a look around its controls. First, to set your ISO, you'll have to look under the camera. Now, you might even understand where under the camera is, but that's okay. It's right here. And here you have a dial that changes what it's set to be din and ghost, which are just film sensitivity settings like ISO. Now this camera is an uncoupled rangefinder, so you'll have to focus by using scale focus, by turning this knob, and you're not going to be able to see what you're focusing. As for the controls, there are two separate rings on the lens itself that control the aperture and the shutter speed. Now, these can only go so far in one direction,
Foolproof and incapable of error.
After which you need to turn the diaphragm into the opposite position just to change your speed again. You could say it's a design flaw. I'm not sure why it's working like that, but you need to keep that in mind because sometimes you might not be able to shoot as fast as you wanted it. And also under the camera you see this small pin, which when pressed you can actually rewind your film. Now with that out of the way, you can finally cock your shutter, and that has to be the most satisfying thing on this camera. There is this big lever. It sounds great, it's very tactile, and it's actually practical. If you shoot it in portrait mode, you just go with your big thumb. And then another plus is the very big and bright viewfinder. And if you're used to the actual rangefinders, you know how tiny their viewfinders can actually be, and very dim in low lights. You can barely see anything at night and can't really compose on them. Now this might not help you focus, but I think it lets you focus on the important stuff like composition. And inside the viewfinder you also have a needle, which is an exposure needle, as you'll see, that is coupled to the big selenium cell in front of the camera. So yeah, it's not just for design, it's actually very practical. And mine has a working light meter. There's also a dial under the lens, which we don't talk about that. I don't know what this is, it's just Russian symbols. The lens itself actually features another knob, which I never understood what it's for, and I never actually looked it up. So if you have any idea what this is for, you can let me know in the comments. It says X, M and C. Man, after all this talking, it almost seems like I'm praising the camera, when in fact my experience with it hasn't been that practical. Maybe like most of you, I got enchanted by the look, and when I got to actually use the camera, I was quite disappointed. Perhaps the biggest turnoff for me was the lens, and not the lens itself. It can produce decently sharp images, it's pretty soft wide open, but it was the fact that, again, the focusing ring can actually move way too freely sometimes.
Foolproof and incapable of error.
And that resulted in a few out of focus shots for me, or missed focus, call it whatever you want it, but for my first roll I think I had at least 10 frames that were out of focus because of this. I can remember if I actually shot something at closer distance and then just forgot to turn it back to infinity, or I was at infinity all the time and then the lens maybe just slightly moved. Maybe I got a bad copy here, but 20% of my shots were actually misfocused.
Foolproof and incapable of error.
I had an issue with the film feeding mechanism, and I had an entire roll that just didn't advance. It just didn't grab onto those little teeth right here. Now you might understand why I have some mixed feelings about this. Is because an entire roll didn't advance at all. I didn't get any images. At least the roll wasn't exposed, but that's not a plus.
Foolproof and incapable of error.
One more thing about this camera is you have your frame counter up here on the top, and you just need to turn this knob to reset it to 0. And I believe my frame counter is not working as intended. Sometimes it just shows 5 frames, then just after a couple of shots it shows 25. Something is not right in there.
Foolproof and incapable of error.
But I don't mind that. It's just a very small inconvenience to not know how many frames you've used. And to try to do this camera some justice, I took it out again in Bucharest and shot 2 rolls of film with it, just to see if I can reignite my spark with this camera, or it's just gonna end up on the drawer again. So I just took the train this time, just to reminisce about days when I was used to daily commute to Bucharest. I'm glad those are long gone. But I was rewarded with a very beautiful ambience. It was very foggy outside. So I made a fast detour to this overpass that crosses the biggest railway in Romania. Okay, so I'm actually in Bucharest right now. I'm in a bit of a rush. I really wanted to go to this spot. We can actually walk across the railroad, and I got my camera with me. We're gonna try it. There it is. Let's see if we can get some good shots. And within the span of 30 minutes I had already finished the roll I previously loaded in the camera. Oh yeah, and you already know my frame indicator is not working correctly, so I had no idea how many shots I had, so that went by very fast. Luckily I just bought this film and I snapped a few more frames at the same location just in case the others will not turn out, because I shot, would you guess what? Some more expired film, this time an Acupan, I don't know, Acupan 800 film, which is basically a respooled FilmIsNotDead 800T. And the film actually turned out not as good as I would expect, but there were results there, you know, I can't complain. I still had a few shots left from the day before, or rather from the night before that, when again it was like this magical fog everywhere, you could barely see anything, and I just booked it to this power plant that I told you it's nearby me, and I snapped these photos, which, oof, I love them. And now here are the photos that I took on that overpass in Bucharest. I guess you could say there are some discernible results. They just came out heavily underexposed. And even though I set the ISO to be around 400, and maybe I didn't meter the scene correctly, because, you know, I kind of do it by eye at this point, and maybe I was incorrect because it was very cloudy outside, maybe because of that. But there are a few honorable, mentions here. Now, again, this shot was taken from that overpass that I told you about. Somehow, even though the film is heavily expired, it kind of works with this scene, you know, you kind of get lost in the details of the rails. Now, these shots could actually be even more decent, to say so, if they were scanned with a plastic scanner. Scan this with my camera, with my Sony a6000, and you can see that the camera wasn't perfectly parallel to the negative, and you have like this sorts of blur on the side. I also scanned a few of them with Epson V370, but again, it's not that great of a scanner, so the results aren't that much better. And that's all for our first roll of Acupan 800. Now let's take a look at the results from the lucky film bought off of AliExpress. And for this roll I decided to double expose the first few frames. So the night before I just shot my computer screen with some patterns that I had, and I just love how abstract some of these photos came out. The patterns just interacted with the scenery in a way that I couldn't actually imagine, and wow, it produced these amazing results that you're looking at right now, and that I can say I'm actually proud of and I actually love. So I don't know, props to the Voskhod for being there for me, I guess, but it's more about the creative intention that made these photographs be great than the camera itself. Now I took a trip to this other location because I still had some film left from Bucharest, and here's how that went. Honestly, it was insane. I had these great conditions again when it just started snowing, and I went to this lake where there were 2 geese just sitting on the lake, and I did shoot the remaining of my shots there. And again, 2 of them turned out, and the others were, would you guess how? Misfocused, or not even misfocused. I'm not sure if it was because of being wide open or the lens got somehow fogged, but again, look at how many shots didn't come out because of this. So yeah, even though this camera produced some great results for me, I can't forgive it. It still has the same issues. So, with a few pros and a few cons, where does this camera fit? It will not fit your pocket, but maybe in your collection. I can actually see this camera being more of a collector's item than an everyday shooting camera, or just maybe sometimes a little experiment. So yeah, this camera is like, you know, wanting to drive a classical car for once, just to see how, you know, what the experience of it is. But when you get to actually using or driving it, you realize, you know, it doesn't do this, it doesn't have that, it doesn't have any, you know, capabilities of a modern camera, but, you know, at least we gave it a shot. We're not gonna use it after that, but you satisfied your curiosity, and I think that's the category that this camera fits in, you know. I'll try it once, it looks cool, but then I'm probably not gonna use it again. But if there are some days where, I don't know, I want to track some looks, okay, maybe I'll think of getting this camera out. But even then, I would have to do some convincing work to take this camera out, because, as I said, I don't necessarily like the way it handles, and I don't necessarily like this issue with the focusing. You know, don't let my camera rot on a shelf. Mine is up for sale. Maybe it will find its new buyer. So, what do you think? Is this camera worth buying? Would you add it to your collection? Did you at least find this video interesting or intriguing? If so, come on, just subscribe. You know, leave a like, leave something.